Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast. In this audio podcast series, the ZtormTronix case review. This is the Shientist with a an audio podcast aligned to in line to works in line to works around nephrology and looking how do young people with chronic kidney disease CKD cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. This is an audio podcast aligned to a Storm Robotics RFPB. This is an audio podcast aligned to the purpose of the purpose of research, the purpose of research or proposed research. This is an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. So this purpose in around this audio podcast aligned to the purpose of proposed research. This audio podcast will delve into sort of the aims, the sort of specific objectives, some aspects, some context in line to sort of the sort of some of the sort of background context in around this works or and then there'll be the sort of the subsequent audio podcast will then delve into will delve into the investigational aspects that sort of thereafter. Okay. So in line to the sort of in line to the sort of aims and objectives in around this works in around as part of this sort of in around and part of the sort of purpose of proposed research. So the aim in around this is that chronic kidney disease, in line to chronic kidney disease as a sort of long-term condition, and has been described as the sort of gradual and sort of usually permanent loss of renal function over time. This sort of works aims to further explore or further looks to seeks to understand and explore sort of coping strategies in young people in young people in CKD in CKD in the ages between 14 and 25, between 14 and 25, and also where in context of CKD, both pre and post transplant, and to identify through works through sort of participants to understand to identify the sort of coping strategies young people with CKD adopt, and that sort of utilize that enable them and that enable them to cope, and in addition to gain a sort of in-depth understanding of concerns before and during concerns before and during sort of the transition between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. And the research would aim to need to develop a much required sort of formal coping transition formal coping sort of guideline, a guideline for clinical teams in in around pediatric nephrology services, aligned to adult, and also aligned to adult renal care as well. So they're aligned to specific some of the specific objectives around this. To explore, to understand sort of coping strategies used by young people between 14 and 25 with CKD post pre and post transplantation, wherein this works, there's there would be the idea would be that there's bases in line that where there would be opportunity for siblings, potentially for siblings to be involved in aspects of this works over an 18 month in around an 18-month duration, and to determine or to also to determine whether or not the coping strategies utilized are helpful, and to establish also to us identify experiences before and during the transition, during again during the transition between pediatric renal services and adult renal care with from patients and potentially siblings aligned to chronic kidney disease pre and post transplant, and also to determine if there is an association between between positive coping and successful transition. The overall sort of aim is to implement sort of a conduct longitudinal research, uh, uh, implementing sort of a mixed methodology for data collection, and again qualitative and quantitative, exploring how young people how young people utilize coping strategies, and again sort of the experiences around in and around utilizing coping strategies against particular challenges that they may have. And the following some of the sort of questions that will help guide this works, and sort of this work in context of the design and data collection and analysis include the following. So what coping strategies what coping strategies do young people with CKD and siblings adopt, sort of utilize? What are the excuse me, what are the challenges young people with CKD pre and pro pre with CKD pre and post transplantation, have during and after transitioning from pediatric renal care to adult renal services? What further healthcare could be provided to young people relating to CKD or chronic kidney disease? How can young people be empowered and become more confident to speak to communicate, and to communicate or speak about aspects, or to speak about the speak about healthcare in an outpatient clinical environment, and what aptitudes do young people acquire as necessary to cope with healthcare independently of for example parents or guardians. In around this as well, as part of this audio podcast, some particular aspects in around the background around this. So a chronic kidney disease, a chronic disease A chronic disease may be viewed as a major stressful life event characterized by a number of recurrent stressful situations that pose serious challenges to adaptation. And there's works by Riddler and team in 1998, Moose and Schaefer in sort of retrospectively in 1984, and Zoltra in 1996. Chronically ill patients have to cope with these sort of with stressful situations, and depending on the results of results of coping they may be able to maintain adequate levels adequate levels of physical, social, and emotional functioning, inspired by a stress coping model of works by Lazarus and Folkman in the 1980s and the 1980s. Much research has been done has been done in around coping and adjustment of patients with chronic kidney with chronic conditions. There's works again by Riddler, by Ritter and Shores in 1996, and Mays and team in 1996 as well. And around this, in around some aspects, in some aspects around this. Although research has provided sort of insights into the ways patients cope with chronic illness and the effects of coping on chronic illness adjustment, it is difficult to determine the precise value of such wealth of information for different chronic conditions. It is important to gain better insight into the type of stresses experienced by patients suffering from different chronic diseases, as information on the nature of disease-related stresses may contribute to a better understanding of patients coping strategy. Literature around this literature has explored has identified different concepts of coping. There's works by Mohammed and team in 2012 a literature review by Mohammed and team in 2012 has summarized how young people cope with CKD in context of a sort of underpinning literature review. The particular literature review uncovers three main themes surrounding coping. For example, lack of a coping definition. Number one, lack of a coping definition. Two, coping strategies in young people, and three, barriers to understanding of coping in young people. There is also evidence to suggest that rates of acute rejection, in context of in context of in context of sort of in context of renal disease, that the rates of acute rejection are higher when young people when young people transition from paediatric renal services to adult renal care. There's works by Hardin and team in 2012 that document some aspects and evidence some aspects in around this. By implementing an integrated transition clinic, and whilst I say this as well, there have been some works where some evidences and works where integrated transition clinics between integrated transition clinics between pediatric renal services and adult renal care do exist, have existed, and at the same time, coupled with in line to this, where by implementing sort of integrated transition clinics coupled with improving healthcare experiences, this can improve people young people young people's adherence to sort of adherence to aspects of healthcare or care as judged by reduced in context of where adherence aligned to aligned to renal disease or kidney disease, where evidence and literature where evidence and literature also informs and indicates that there have been sort of retrospectively sort of transplant failure where transplants have failed owing to sort of the transitioning aspects between pediatric renal services and adult renal care, and works by Harden and team in 2012 sort of documents some aspects around this, understanding how excuse me, understanding how young people cope with renal disease should be an integral part of the transition process, because coping positively informs that young people with CKD need or require to adjust both both cognitive and the social aspects the cognitive and social aspects of lives to meet the challenges of living with CKD, and there's works that's been documented by the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology in 2011 in some aspects are aligned to this, aligned in around this. Research in this specialty has largely focused on aspects aligned to quality aligned to quality of life, or QOL, and not so much coping strategies young people utilize. There's works that have been by Brem and team in the 1980s, late 1980s, 1988, and Snethen and team in 2004 that have documented some aspects in with this, and quality QOL or quality of life research does not have the same focus as understanding coping strategies. Coping surrounds a plan of action designed to achieve a major or overall overall objectives according to young people according to young people in context of where young people potentially have an overall sort of or where young people hold something hold a particular aim as a main sort of value, and quality of life or QOL relates more to personal satisfaction or dissatisfaction with the cultural or intellectual conditions under which individuals live, for example. And there's works that have been documented by Mohammed and team in 2012 in around this. Understanding how young people cope with CKD or any chronic illness illness is thus important, considering many may feel less positive about their own, but about less positive about own qualities, perceive less social support or or be adversely affected by changes to environment, placing them at higher risk of poorer psychosocial and at higher risk of poorer psychological and psychosocial functioning when compared to healthy cohorts or healthy cohorts or healthy peers. And there's works by works that have been documented by the Department of Health retrospectively in 2006 in around this. And well-being in context of quality life, where well-being is concerned, it has been evidenced in keeping with health, in keeping with something that's referred to as health-related quality of life, or HRQOL. And HRQOL has been shown to be mediated by coping in some aspect, in some context, in young people. And there's works that's been documented by Schmidt and team in 2003 within the fields of sort of medicine and sort of health and health psychology. Efforts have increasingly and have sort of increasingly been made to assess coping strategies in part aligned to chronic, in keeping with chronic illnesses. And there's works by Isa in 1990, Isa in 1997, and Isa and Jenny in 2007 that have documented some findings in around this. Despite young people's health being higher up on, for example, health policy agendas, implementation of youth-friendly services, including transitional care, frustratingly dampened or slow. There's works by McDonough in 2013 that had documented some works around this. There have been advances in aspects of pediatric nephrology and sort of and around this and around the specialty. Young people still have challenges, or have challenges during can have challenges during sort of the transitioning between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. And there's works by Myers in 2002 that document some aspects around this. All youth, whatever physical, cognitive, and or circumstances, are confronted with difficult all youth or young people, whatever physical, cognitive, and or social circumstances, generally are confronted with challenges or difficulties that test the ability to cope, and this specifically impede on the emotional well-being on a young person living with chronic kidney disease, or CKD. In kidney care, young people who transition between pediatric renal services and adult renal care, or present directly to adult services, often struggling with adjustment issues and problems with the and can and where has been evidence and documented as where where patients or service users can have issues and problems with concordance. There may well be doubts about the ability of the young person to achieve independence, which requires families to seek assistance in determining which scenarios young people with CKD can cope. And there's works by Cameron in 1995 that had documented some works around this. Negative coping. Negative coping can lead to poor adherence and early death. Considering the potential long-term impact of CKD over time, collecting data on how young people cope, on how young people with CKD cope over time will thus help understand how to offer better care pathways for them and also making a transition between pediatric renal services and adult renal care smoother. And there have been several tools and investigations in some contexts to support sort of the transition process. The transition checklist by works by Whitehouse and Payon in 19 sorry and Payon Payon in 1998. The rate of graft loss in young people post transplant has been documented as being quite high, as being high, and works by Watson in 2000 have documented some aspects around this and associated with and also where the rate of graft loss or allograft loss has also been associated with poor transition into adult renal services or adult renal care. And effective transition must be seen as an integral and a routine component of the medical care provided to young people with chronic kidney disease or CKD. Coping positively and timely sort of transition can empower young people to take full part in sort of the management of CKD, chronic kidney disease, or a kidney condition more effectively and together these must be envisaged as important areas of by service providers of both pediatric and adult renal services. And there's works retrospectively that have been documented in the British Association or by the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology. Through age appropriate clinics of young people, the availability of a service directory with information, helpful contacts, and links to additional information can support the most important elements of transitioning between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. The last 5 years, the last sort of 5 years, if not more, if not longer, have thus seen research gather momentum with an objective in around where authors sort of develop the evidence base have seek to develop the evidence base and around where in so much that a sound foundation for prospective prospective work addressing the many unanswered questions and hypotheses in the area of transitional care or transitional work research. And then again, there's works that have been documented sort of retrospectively as well by McDonough in 2007. And there is still a need for more transitional care based research, but further work is also required related to the determinants of coping. Researchers and health professionals should take advantage of the wealth of experience the wealth of the wealth of experience of and evidence from collaborations and from collaborations which are crucial. And there's works by by McDonough and Kaufman in 2009 that have evidence, some works in around this, and further the BAPN, the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology, and the Renal Association, at least in 2010. In 2010, informed that the transition phase tends to begin begin in an academic year, in context of age, in context of age and maturity, has been documented by the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology and the Renal Association in 2010 as the beginning in academic year 9, and should aim to prepare the young person to transfer to adult renal services, by ensuring they have number one, an understanding of the disease, its treatments and related health issues. Number two, confidence to communicate or speak about sort of health in an outpatient environs. Number three, resolve issues relating to for example, venesection and procedures such as renal biopsy and line insertion. And number four, begin to acquire sort of necessary skills to cope with healthcare independent. Begin to acquire necessary skills to cope with healthcare independently of, for example, parents or guardians. There's works again in around that's been documented by the British Association of Paediatric Nephrology and the Renal Association in 2000, in around 2010, in around this. So that sort of closes in on this sort of audio podcast in and around the purpose of proposed research aligned to nephrology, and how do young people with CKD or chronic kidney disease cope, and what are the experiences between pediatric renal services and adult renal care. And this has been an audio podcast aligned to Storm Robotics RFPB. This has been an audio podcast aligned to another Storm Robotics production. Thanks for tuning in.